Slot, we're calling the planning commission meeting to order. I guess before we proceed, I would like to, I guess, make a motion to amend the agenda. Before we hold a scheduled public hearing, there will be a presentation.
By
from-
Kerr Law.
Okay, per law, which is Benton City's legal support. So that was the change to the agenda. Does anybody oppose? I guess.
Just
They
second
vote.
the amendment.
Yeah.
Okay,
Alright.
no objections can.
No,
Okay.
Objection.
but we still do the roll call and pledge
Yes,
allegiance and
yes.
other.
Yes, I was going to
Yeah.
proceed with that. Okay, and let's roll call, please.
Commissioner McLeod,
Here.
Commissioner Thompson,
Here.
Commissioner Wallace,
Here,
Commissioner Lynn,
Here.
Commissioner Hamilton,
Here.
and with that, we will do the pledge of allegiance. With the little hand up, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
That, community discussion. Yes? You're at 30, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm standing up, acting like I'm ready to be recognized.
For your president.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, and then we're gonna go from there to the meeting minutes.
You're gonna go.
On the meeting.
Here. You're gonna be up first.
It did not mean automatically drafted, versus.
No, it's not automatic. It took me all day.
I bet it did.
You did a
You
good
did a
job.
good job, though, I thought.
Yes, very.
It sounded accurate to me.
There was way too much going on to even figure out what was being said.
That's one thing I wanted to mention about the meeting. Is that we need to not talk over each other because we lost valuable information and that had to been really hard on you. I mean, you did a good job, but
I'm used to doing these. I've done verbatim reports for years. But it is what it is.
Yeah.
That's what you get. So-
Okay, I was just, wow, I'm impressed. I did notice a change, so thank you very much. And with that, did anybody have? I'm gonna comment on these. There was one thing I noticed. I apologize. Commissioner Wallace, there was something in here that I believe. What page are you on? I can tell myself, page 15. And it's just because it changes the meaning of this sentence, and I will say it is Commissioner Wallace's statement for the last one on the page, for Commissioner Wallace, in it, the first sentence says, well, what I understand is that we have to take a few traction on it. I think that was action rather than traction.
that makes sense.
So that was the one I noted.
I didn't see anything wrong with the minutes other than people talking over each other and we all say, too much.
Yeah, I
I thought
realized
of a
that.
teacher from school that would really dock us for saying that
Mhm.
over and over. Yeah.
Like you really don't have to capture it in the meeting notes. Give me a hard time, Carla. Okay, anybody have comments, please, about the recommendations on how we perform our meeting so that Carla doesn't have to. Discussions. What's better?
Not talk over each other and try not to repeat.
Anybody else?
Yeah.
Okay, and with that, instead of having a public, I have an absolute moment. For Eric.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. I am excited to be here. I actually the mayor mentioned that last time with the meeting that there might have been a little bit of confusion. It sounded like we had a couple of new folks that have joined the team. So wanted to take a chance and try to be able to answer some questions because I know there was some confusion last time about specifically rezones. And I know those are a real hot topic with planning commissions. And so that really, I think, would help if I gave just a little bit of an overview about site-specific rezones, because those are one of the things that's going to come to a lot in the future, and they're incredibly difficult. And what I mean by that is that there's whole articles, and I'm not just saying that, there literally are whole articles that are written on, and this is the title of the article: the multiple personalities of site-specific rezones, or cheat sheet for everything you need to know about site-specific rezones, because it is very, very difficult to kind of understand why they come to you, but they come for a recommendation. And so what I'll do is I just kind of start at the top, and then I'll kind of go through some of these things, and then be able to answer any, or try to answer any questions, and then see if maybe that helps with not just this process, but maybe even some of the other processes as well, because I know there's a lot of different things that the Planning Commission has to do. But long and short of it is, site-specific rezones, and I'll just keep using that term because I want to make sure that we distinguish between site-specific rezones and the zoning ordinance, or any other what we call area-wide rezone, right? So area-wide rezones. This is I'll start with a one that is an actual black and white, and then we'll just fade off into the gray and probably never come back. But the black and white start is site-specific rezones are quasi-judicial. Area-wide rezones are purely legislative. So you might make some recommendations about the zone. You'll probably see the zoning ordinance when it comes through, when it's coming up for updating, but that's clearly for the entire city, those types of things. Site-specific rezones are truly this hybrid legislative. I'm going to take you back to 8th grade civics class, but truly they are the kind of hybrid of a legislative act and an executive act, which is typically what we call a permitting act. So, but it's the legislative body that will make that decision, that will make that quote permitting decision. So with that being said, trying to understand, okay, well, it kind of starts out legislative, then switches over to administrative and exec. When I say administrative executive, I'm using that interchangeably because the executive branch is the one who administers that. So as long and short of what it comes down to is that we start, okay, the city gets an application, and it's really kind of an odd thing. The city gets an application from an applicant for an ordinance. That's something that will actually end in an ordinance. And that is very, very rare, right? That's not something, because those are typically, ordinances are purely legislative. And so that would be something that would come from the council, from the mayor. They would go through that process and then come to council and debate an ordinance and decide whether they want to move forward with. This is odd because you have an applicant who's actually coming in and asking for a particular thing that will eventually result in an ordinance if approved. So that's kind of the first thing. So, okay, so they come in, the application comes in, we go to our code. If we start there, which our code, and George, I think will back me up 100% on this, chapter 270 is, it's a tough one. It was redone recently, and some of the things are still kind of left hanging out there. We still need to clean up some items. But the long and short of it is, it does, you just have to know where it starts to get you going down a few of these roads. And if you don't realize that, okay, wait, that now that what looks like it applied actually stopped applying to that particular type of action, and you kind of need to switch over. So there's a few things that we need to clean up in there, but it's much better than what we had. So with that being said, so the first thing that comes in with a site-specific rezone, if we go over to our little matrix at the beginning here, our little boxes, we look and see that it is because in our code, we define site-specific rezones as a type 3. So type 3, then you go over and you say, okay, type 3 is administrative, ministerial. Okay, type 1. Okay, then all the way over to type 3, quasi-judicial. Notice of application is required. It goes to the planning commission for the open record hearing, which is when you take your actual evidence in. And then it referred to the council for approval, and either they can do several different things. They can either just accept your recommendation. They can do what we call a closed record hearing, which basically is to analyze all the evidence that you took in and then make their own conclusions and their own findings. But long and short of it is for your purposes, the thing that's most important is that you'll start with it as a quasi judicial matter. And then you'll go through your open record hearing, you'll take in that evidence, and then you'll make you'll have findings, you'll come up with findings and then make that recommendation to council. So starting with the first part of that, the quasi judicial aspect of that, and I know there's been, this is not very clear either, but one of the things that is very clear about quasi judicial matters in Washington State is we have this thing called the appearance of fairness doctrine, which we probably all heard of that, but the long and short of it is basically what it means is that the appearance of fairness doctrine must be fair in three respects. It must be fair in form. In other words, we have to use the right process the form that it takes. Substance, the actual evaluating of the thing, and then appearance. It also has to appear fair. So, which is a very odd high standard that, well, what appears fair, what doesn't, right? So it depends on your viewpoint, right? I mean, so anyway, so long and short is when we start with a quasi judicial matter, one of the things that we tried to do is come up with a script that really will apply the appearance of fairness doctrine right out of the gate, so that it helps the folks that are having the decision makers to be able to determine whether they think they may have a conflict and whether they need to say something, or if somebody in the public thinks that somebody may have a conflict, it gives them a chance to say that, and then gives the member a chance to decide whether they think that has changed their mind and they can no longer be unbiased. But the long and short of it is, what it comes down to is we go through this script and we say, and this kind of, well, I'll go through it real quick just so that it really kind of puts the framework. But the first aspect of it is a quasi-judicial hearing or proceeding is to render a final decision on the materials that are presented. It's defined as a proceeding in which the council, in this case, the planning commission, defines the legal rights, duties, and privileges of specific parties in a hearing, proceeding, or other contested proceeding. So you're actually deciding something for a particular applicant. And then the third aspect I just told you was the form, substance, and appearance. And then finally, we get into essentially the questions for the members, which is members should consider whether they have potential conflicts as follows. And there's 5 major ones. A demonstrated bias for or against any of the parties, any direct or indirect financial interest in the outcome of the proceeding, which would affect the member personally. See whether there has been any prejudgment of the issues prior to the hearing of the facts, whether there has been any ex parte contact with anyone other than staff prior to this hearing. And I'll get into ex parte a little more in a second, but essentially that just means communication with anyone outside of this setting, because essentially you're kind of acting like a judge. Now, I know in site-specific rezones, you're only making a recommendation, but you are creating the open record. So you still need to make sure that you don't, if you've had those ex parte communications with any of the folks, and I'll define a little bit about who it's different depending on who the communication was with, whether it was someone who was a proponent or opponent of it, or somebody that was not involved, a citizen who's not talking to their representative. So there's a little bit of a distinction there. And then finally, E, which is any conflict which a member believes would prevent them from hearing this matter fairly and impartially. And so then the first question is, so once I go through those, typically the first question is, if any member has any of these concerns or disclosures, now would be the time to make those known. And then you would go through and say, yeah, I talked to, so-and-so or whatever. And then you would put that on the record. If you had any biases or you felt you couldn't be fair and have prejudgment of the issues, you would need to say that at that time and say, I feel like I'm conflicted out on this because I can't be impartial, right? Or whatever. That's really your right and obligation at that point. The next thing, or the last thing that we do when we go through that script, is we end it with, are there any members of the public seeking to disqualify a member of the council, or in this case, the planning commission, from participating in the proceedings? Somebody could then make that objection. That doesn't mean you're out, right? And so this happens a lot. You probably see it in the paper from some other locations, but it's been kind of a hot contested issue. But long and short is basically that's someone's opportunity to come up and say, I don't think you can be fair, and here's why. And they can state their case, and then you can say, yeah, I appreciate your 2 cents, and here's your 2 cents back. Or you know what? No, maybe you're onto something. I think now that you told me that, maybe you're right. Maybe I should take my conflict myself out. But that's not something that just a member of the public can object to you being on there and you're gone kind of thing. That's a much more involved process. And if there's a way, and I don't want to get into it because it's not really for the purposes of this, but there's a way to meet separately with the city attorney and decide whether you have a conflict legally, and you can go through that process during a recess and then come back and do that. But we won't get into that right now. Long and short of it is, once you go through that and then you're all properly seated for the hearing, you have your open record hearing, you take in the evidence, you're creating the record essentially. And then after that, you come up with findings and conclusions, and then you forward that and make a recommendation in with regard to site specific rezones. You make a recommendation to the council, and then the council can do whatever they want. They can accept your recommendation and adopt your findings. They can hold a closed record hearing, come up with their own findings and still accept your recommendation, or they can come up with findings and deny it, right? They can do a lot of different things. But the long and short of it is, once that process gets going and it leaves here and then it goes over to the council, that's when they have to make their decision. Now, coming back to this board, once you've taken that process, that quote deliberative process that you're going to engage in after you've taken in the record and you created this quote open record hearing, you now have this record. And so then you need to make your recommendation. So in this particular case, with site specific rezones, it's very difficult because it's not, it's going to be, a lot of it is based on what you're hearing during the open record hearing. It should be, and that's what you want. You want it to be based on what you've heard at the open record hearing and what's been presented to you by staff, because they'll provide you with a lot of the background information that's purely factual. It's not opinions. So in our case, we go from that process. Once we hold the open record hearing, then we move over to the review criteria. So for site specific rezones specifically, the decision on a proposed map amendment shall be based on findings and conclusions thereof as they relate to the following. And so then it goes through the 5 criteria. So then the first criteria is that the proposed map amendment, and when I say proposed map amendment, that's just a fancy way of saying the rezone. The rezone is in conformance with the goals and policies of the Benton City Comprehensive Plan as amended. So that's really the big one. When you start with that one, because that's a tough one to overcome, because the comp plan gets deference. And so that's good news, bad news. The good news is that if you follow the comp plan, and the decisions based on that, it's going to be very deferential, because it's assumed that the comp plan, when it was adopted, which was a purely legislative act, by the way, was done for a specific reason to basically forward the goals or to advance the goals of the city, right? So that's really the kind of the thing that doesn't necessarily, and people really get wrapped up on this, that doesn't mean just because it's in the comp plan that you get a rezone. But it does make it more difficult. It does make it clear that that's really your starting point. So once you do that, then the other 4 are the property in question is suitable for the uses permitted under the requested zoning district. So if they're talking about it's the permitted uses suitable for uses permitted under the requested zoning district. So let's see, I'm trying to think of an example that would be a really good example of that. So for example, like if there's multifamily kind of use, but it's like maybe its terrain is different. I can't really think of a good example there. Maybe we should think on that, and maybe George can help me find a good example of that. But 3 is public facilities such as roads, sewer, and water, and other public facilities are adequate to support the proposed map amendment. 4, the proposed map, and this is number 3 is kind of a sticky one, because a lot of times people get stuck on that because they think, well, wait a second, there's no roads there, we shouldn't amend this to that zone. Well, kind of. And what I mean by that is, well, it depends, because one of the things that would happen is you're not approving an actual project, you're approving the zone change. So what would happen is that when they come in after they get their rezone, they're going to come in and talk to George, and George's going to be like, you can build all you want, but you know you're going to have to put a road and water and so you know there's not that stuff's not down that road, right? And so so that can happen, and so there's situations where that can get a little muddy. But if it's truly in an area where it really wouldn't be suitable based on the infrastructure that is in the area, then you can consider that as a factor. Fourth thing, the proposed map amendment and associated uses are compatible with neighboring land uses. That's oftentimes that really kind of shakes out in terms of like, well, is it right beside the zone that it's trying to become? Well, yeah, then it's tough to say that, okay, well, that doesn't really fit with the neighboring uses because maybe the other areas around it. Now, there are situations where you could have things that don't really fit. It could have the other land uses or the other zoning around it, but it still might not be suitable for that particular spot. So there's enough room in there to decide, wait a sec, is this a one-off? Is this something that's an anomaly? Is this something that's not really, when you look on a flat piece of paper in 2 dimensions, does that look different than it does if you get a much different three-dimensional view of it? And then 5 is the proposed map amendment rezone addresses a need which is improperly or inadequately addressed by the present zoning designation. So that's a situation where oftentimes we've had situations where there's been Scrivener's errors, where literally it's like, it wasn't meant to be that when the map went through, and it's like, okay, well, wait a sec. That's improperly adequately addressed in the present zoning designation kind of thing. So we've been able to have situations like that. But anyway, long and short of it is, I won't go on ad nauseum because I know I'm overloading you with a lot of information, but essentially the main thing that's critical, and I think that council really needs from the commission, is to be able to have a recommendation that's based on findings, and you can use whatever you get through your open record hearing to make those findings. And then once you have that and you decide that's your recommendation as a body, the majority rules, it goes to the council, and then they can do what they want. So I think that's been part of the challenge, is that I think getting the making sure that and it is kind of tough because, and it's hard because you're asking other people to kind of do your work for you, and that other person is trying to kind of read your mind. I'm pointing to George here because he's trying to think about, well, what are your findings? What are your findings that you're going to have, and what are you doing? Because he's one drafting. You can't draft those on the fly. I mean, we could. They wouldn't look very good, but it'd be pretty sloppy. But we could do it, right? At the end of the day. You need to come up with findings that you agree with and that you can use to support your recommendation. But it's a little tough because staff really kind of is in a tough spot, because they kind of got to say, well, no, wait a second, this is what we see, this is what we think is what we know going in with the application. It looks like it would meet all these criteria. So these are the findings that we think that they would come up with. You can amend those, and then once you amend those, you don't need to draft those on the spot. You can make whatever, if the proposed findings that George is bringing you or the staff is bringing you are you want to modify those, you modify those on the fly. You can do that in this meeting and basically say what you want those to look like. And then what we and staff do afterwards is we go make that nice, pretty, we do all the markouts and stuff, and then we make it nice and pretty and send it to council. And that's your recommendation with your findings. So but anyway, yeah, that's really the long and short of it is it's a tough one because it is a tweener. It's not really one or the other, but I think that's I don't know if that helps with some of the questions that have been coming up, or I know that's what I've heard from council, is that they're wanting the findings and the recommendation to come and be prepared in such a way. And I don't know if that's something that we can be more of assistance on, but yeah, however we need to do that. I know that's been the complaint from council. So anyway.
Okay, and this is our first
Sure.
response here, and I want to make sure I kind of
Sure.
comprehend this.
Sure.
Is that, so what I think you're hearing, what I think I'm hearing you say is that rather than pull our own findings of facts to make a determination during our discussions as a commission, you would like us to refrain from adding extraneous discussion and stick to the findings that have been presented to us in our packets and
No.
modify that.
Not at all. Not at all. No, I don't want you to feel that. No, because I don't want you to feel that that's the pressure is to agree with a staff recommendation, or if you feel like staff, because staff has to make the decision, like when this thing comes in and does it fit the comp plan? Does it do this? And does it other zones? Okay, yeah. So they give you a draft, but that's really what they are your findings. So no, please don't think that's what I intended to say by that. They are truly based on the only thing I really need you to make sure you're doing is basing those findings on what you're hearing here, right? This open record hearing, but whatever those findings are is truly up to the commission. Those are yours.
Question at the end.
Sure.
Because I work off the plan almost extensively. And so I bring that into
You work off the plan.
discussion, the
Mm.
comprehensive plan.
Oh, sure,
I will
okay.
I will cite sections.
Sure,
or
okay.
pages or
Okay.
to bring that to discussion, which is beyond usually I'll say the draft
Mhm.
findings that the staff are providing for us.
Sure.
In our packets, and I move forward from that. So I want to make sure that.
Absolutely.
That's good, and we
Absolutely.
should continue
Absolutely.
to do that.
Good.
Okay, and.
No,
I'm
That was
sure-
my question, and so.
Okay.
Yeah, no,
It's
we're
same-
trying
that's real.
to get it. It's kind of tough because we're basing it on the application and what we see and what we look in the code and what we and when I say we, I mean me and George and the mayor and other, we're trying to base it on that. And so then when it comes to you, it's really, but this is what we think that it's going to come out with. But at the end of the day, those are not your findings when they come to you. That is just purely staff. But now a lot of that stuff is our facts, right? That's the address, that's the, what have you, right? So that's the lot size, those types of things. But, excuse me, if you're going to make recommendations based on findings that you believe are the ones that the recommendation needs to be based on, this is your time to make those known and make sure that then it's clear what you're all voting on. And that's where it gets a little sloppy too, because it's hard so I'll give you an example of sometimes it's easier to define what something is by what it's not. And what this is not is what the luxury that a hearing examiner gets. The luxury that a hearing examiner gets, they get to sit here like a judge and they get to take all of this in and shake their head and listen to all the testimony and the recording, and they go back to their office and they got 2 weeks to listen to everything and do whatever. And then they draft their findings and they put a big fat signature on the bottom of it. And then now that becomes the law of the case. This is why it's a little clunky for planning commissions, because we're trying to be your stenographers, but at the same time trying to guess where you're going to go so that we can get you started. But if you disagree with it, you're certainly able to do it. What you really need to do though is make sure that whatever findings you're coming up with are two things. One, based on the open record hearing that you're engaged in, and sorry, I switched from numbers to letters there, didn't I? And B is you definitely want to make sure that you're using the criteria that's in the code. So as long as you're doing those two things, as long as you're open to, that's not three. You're doing three things. You're making sure that you're complying with the appearance of fairness doctrine. You're holding the open record hearing and basing your decision totally based on what you're hearing in the open record hearing, and you're using the criteria that's in the code. That's exactly how to do it. So yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Al? Go ahead.
thank you, because sometimes I felt like we've been bamboozled when we got in here, because our setup, because with the presentation, and so that, I felt like it's already been decided, and then if we don't agree with what's going on, it seems like it causes discontent.
Well, but I do want to say this. Let me clarify. So I don't mean to imply that you need to be based on that, but you need to also understand that what staff, and when I say staff, I'm including myself in this, right? Because I've got to deal with it too. And long and short of it is what we're trying to do is make sure that based on what staff is seeing, this is what looks pretty clear. These are the facts, the address, the different acreage, those types of things. But at the end of the day, it looks to staff like it meets these criteria. Okay, so that's the staff recommendation. And that's really what you need is staff to, and that's me, Mayor, and the George, to make a recommendation to you about why we think this is the way to go. That doesn't mean you have to make that recommendation. Now, and that would be fine because you can go to council and then your recommendation will go to council and council can say, well, wait a second, what about this? And what about that? But it's truly just that. It's a recommendation of this body that you're required by the code to make. But at the end of the day, the council's the one that's got to make the decision. They're the quasi judicial deciding body that will have to make that decision. And staff will also be able to say, listen, the planning commission found this, that, and the other. And if they decide they don't agree with that and they want to go through and have a close record hearing and look at the same evidence you did and come to completely different conclusions, that's their right? It's going to be on them. So, but I don't want you to take, or I don't want to conflate the idea that somehow because staff is making these recommendations and that you're not bound to follow them, that they're not well thought out, they're not well investigated things that are and certainly no bias or arbitrariness about what the outcome needs to be. But the key is that at the end of the day, the recommendation based on those criteria, you're going to need to be able to point to conclusions, findings that say why it doesn't fit what the nature and character of the community or the surrounding area, right? I mean, that's not and the court. So what happens is if you make a recommendation and you don't have a substantial or you don't have an adequate factual basis for that recommendation, and then it's adopted by council, a court, and here's where I give you the scared straight portion of the program. That's where we can get in big trouble because a court, this is one of the few things that a court can actually under LUPA, Land Use Petition Act. It's just a fancy way to describe a really, it's supposed to be a very expedited process to get land use decisions in front of a judge to get a ruling, which has turned into a much longer process than it should have been, but whatever. My point is that it really is important to make sure because a court, this is one of the few areas, there's probably no other area that I can think of where a judge can tell a city council to approve an ordinance. And that's exactly what the remedy is that if they're wrong, if the council takes your recommendation and it's not based on facts and they accept that recommendation and move forward with it and somebody decides to file a LUPA action, they can go and a judge can say, you didn't follow the standards. Now, especially if you're outside what the comp plan says. So that's really the biggie is making sure you're following the comp plan, that the zone is compliant with the comp plan. But yeah, it's one of the rare areas where a judge can really get in our business and tell us, no, you have to approve this because it's related to an applicant. It's not related to a purely legislative act. So we might have to approve it anyway. And then you're looking at a lot of legal bills to undo that.
So we're gonna follow the present comprehensive plan until another one's set up, correct?
Yes. So you have a comp plan, and then I think we're in like first year one of a 2-year process to update it. I think
That's correct.
okay. That's right.
Until that's finally updated and approved, we're gonna follow the present one?
Yeah, I don't think we have any comp plan amendments in the queue, do we? We don't have any people asking for. Yeah, I think we just dealt with ours last year, so I think what we have is what we have right now.
Okay.
Yep.
Alan, the meeting
Eric,
that,
that's okay.
or
You can
Eric,
call me. Hey,
excuse
trust me,
I am so
hey, it's
sorry.
a-
I've known.
it's
you
a
for so
compliment,
many
trust me.
years. At any rate, the meeting last time was a little different than our normal meetings. And so, we are the legislative body, so we hash things out.
Mhm.
And I wondered, is it appropriate for us to go into executive session to hash things out so that we can see the page that we're not obviously seeing correctly because we're all seeing it from a different view and some of us are seeing it from many years of the view and others just arrived.
Yeah, no, let me double check, but the starting point for the rule is you can go into executive session for quasi judicial matters. Now, I say that with a little trepidation because I don't know. I know that's something that we can do when we're at the council stage because they're the ones actually making the final decision. So I just let me get back to the office in the
Okay.
morning and clarify with Dan. But
We've done it before
Sure.
and it helped immensely.
well, but we've also
Yeah.
there's 2 ways you can do that, right? if there's a potential for litigation and your attorney's here, then we can always go into executive session. But there may be a chance, what I think you're asking is there may be a chance for you all to go to an executive session just to discuss a quasi judicial matter on your own without having to have an attorney present.
Right.
And that I need to confirm, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, because we'd have George and
Hmm.
Mayor Lynn at the time of the discussion,
Hmm.
but that's something that I think would help.
Mhm.
It's helped previously.
Well, I think that's why they have the exception for quasi judicial matters is because they want, you need that level of communication to be able to take place so that you can go through that process and consider the record. So I think we're okay on that, but I
Okay.
want to make absolutely certain before but I'll email everybody.
I
and
think
let you
it
know.
keeps the meeting from rambling into other areas. When we can narrow it down to
Mhm.
what we're supposed to be doing.
There's just a lot of things you do that aren't quasi judicial, right? I mean,
Right.
so
Mhm.
so you would think that that same would apply, but let me just verify that in the morning.
Thank you.
You betcha, absolutely. Any other questions or confusion I can add?
I definitely,
Okay,
because in all these public hearings,
sure.
the public, the citizens are invited to come and participate.
Mhm.
I think they should be weighed heavily in our decision.
Sure.
But I don't feel that come into play.
Sure.
How do we justify that outside of the comprehensive plan?
No, I hear you. I hear you. So what you're basically saying is there's a whole doctrine of cases and stuff where what we call the NIMBY complex, the not in my backyard, right? So, and that's, you have to be very, very careful of because you have to make sure, that's why I said before, you have to make sure that when you're taking in the open record, whatever comes in the open record, you're basing your decision and you're following those criteria. Though that's your safety. You stay there and you're going to be fine. So where there's room for interpretation in those criteria, you're allowed to have that, take that into consideration. So for example, the facilities, the proposed map amendment and associated uses are compatible with neighboring land uses, right? So that's going to be an opinion. I mean, that could be, I mean, there's a certain factual aspect to that, I think, because you need to show that they are in fact neighboring and the land uses that are already there. But we start out, I think this is also the thing to remember as well. The applicant is the one who starts out with the burden to show that when they file this application, that they've met the criteria. The burden is on them. Now, with that being said, the burden kind of shifts because after they meet the comp plan, now we need to show why, because because think about what you're basically asking. You're saying, we as a municipal corporation decided this was what we thought this area should be on a big picture. Now, all of a sudden on a small picture, we're not so sure. And there's sometimes there are very good reasons for that, but you got to be super careful because if you're going against your comp plan, it's not a no look. It's not like, oh, we meet number one, we're done, right? Not necessarily. But once you go past number one, if you don't have number one, you really need to make sure that you've got a record that supports meeting these other four criteria. The property in question is suitable for uses permitted under the requested zoning district, right? It's public facilities such as roads, water, sewer, public facilities are adequate to support the proposed map amendment. You could make that determination that you don't think those are adequate, right? If you, I'm sorry.
No, I'm sorry. Nope.
Somebody second. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt. The proposed map amendment and associated uses are compatible with neighboring land uses. And then 5, the proposed map amendment addresses a need which is improperly or inadequately addressed. So most of those are finding ways to get someone a rezone, right? And so, those are forward looking. And so if you don't feel like they meet those, you just need to make sure you got the facts to back that up and you can point to that and we can draft those findings and then get those. And those are your findings and they go to council as the recommendation. So, and obviously you do that as a majority. So, but I don't mean to imply that you should be very careful if what you're doing isn't following the comp plan, because that is something that is legislatively set in place by the legislature, i.e. council, as your starting point, right? The comp plan under growth management. This is a thing that really kind of helped me years ago. I had somebody explain this to me, that the comp plan and growth management is much more, I don't want to say aspirational, because that makes it sound like it's, kind of pie in the sky, but it really is a plan. It is not it is not a regulation. It's a plan. Now, it has to be adopted by the legislature, and they basically are saying, hear ye, this is our plan. Thou shalt follow this, right? So you can get away from that if you find that there are specific issues where you don't think like certain things are qualifying. But if the facts are pretty clear that they are, and it's complying, then it could be problematic if the council ultimately either follows a recommendation or disregards a recommendation that is in opposite of that. So it can be a little treacherous.
Address infrastructure regarding
Mhm.
the evaluation of these things. We have horrible traffic issues in this county, and it's getting worse by the day. That's a lot of the public input we're getting.
Sure.
Is that
Yeah.
you do not put this,
Mhm.
this multi-family unit here, it's just not appropriate for the roads. I kind of got some conflicting.
Yes.
Direction, whether we can consider, because that is huge.
Yes and no. Okay, so let me add to the confusion. No, I'm sorry. I'm being facetious, but no, my point is that it really is tough because what you're saying is one of those criteria, right? If you all determine that it doesn't meet, sorry, I lost my spot here, that it doesn't meet that for the traffic, then you would then say, for reasons of traffic, that is different than what they would come in and the city staff, including us, would tell them, okay, you want to build, I don't know, another Dollar General, I don't know, what's something, right? You want to build something? Okay, guess what? You know, this is what you're going to have to build for infrastructure to even make that project happen on that site. Now, the other analysis, which is even kind of a little above that, or not a little, is a lot above that, is what you just referred to with regard to general traffic. Will a certain is there a way that can be mitigated? Really kind of what the question is that if that cannot be mitigated at the project level.
Yeah, and you can't, I'm assuming Brad
Right.
can't change the project, and so the traffic in that site-specific location is going to impact the entire region.
Right.
And that's why I'm trying to understand.
Right. It's nuanced. It really is, because oftentimes when somebody says, well, you shouldn't do that zone, even though it's in the comp plan and it's at the end of a road and whatever. Well, we don't want a bunch of traffic. That's not the same thing, because that can be alleviated through the project. In other words, like, oh, that road's not wide enough. That can be alleviated through the project. In other words, if the project, it would require, George and the mayor can tell them, sorry, you need a wider road here. You can build that all day long on that site, but you're going to need a much bigger road to handle the traffic here. Now, if what you're saying is that you don't think that the area, the neighboring use, or the area that this project would be in wouldn't want just extra traffic, that's usually not going to be good enough. It needs to be able to be showed that based on that criteria, if I can find it, because
Right, and
It's
that's
fine.
what we're trying to get to, that nuance where it will have a significant impact on this one road that is the only arterial through this area.
And do you know where you're going to get that
Yeah.
nuance? Through the open record hearing. That's where you're going to take in public input. That's where you're going. That's the whole reason behind it.
We need to,
Gosh.
and saying
Right,
that over
yeah,
and
right.
over, but we're being told we cannot take that into consideration on approving or denying these.
No, what you can take into consideration is number 3, public facilities such as roads, sewer and water, and other public facilities are adequate to support the proposed map amendment. So if you have to find, let me flip it. Yeah, I'll flip it a different way. So maybe it'll be easier to get up to that point. You have to find that that's true to recommend. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
That's,
So-
how do we do that?
So you are able, through the open record hearing, I'll tell you how to do it. So George gives you the facts right? The staff will give you the facts of like, this is the place, this is the roads, these are the address, this is where all this is the site, right? So you'll have those facts, and then you can take in that testimony at the open record hearing, part of which is what George is putting into the record as he's reading his report. So that's part of the record that you can consider, but you have to find that the public facilities such as roads, sewer, and water and other public facilities are adequate to support the proposed map amendment. So what would be an example of that? Okay, let's say that the city has a 8-inch line, an 8-inch sewer line in a particular area. And somebody wants to put in a Walmart or something like that. And it would take ripping up half the city because that's not going to support that big of a location, right? So you're going to, you can't rip up the roads all the way to 225? I mean, is that, kind of thing. So it would be something silly like that, where it's clear that the facilities aren't going to be able to support that type of zone. So essentially what you're saying is that even though the comp plan says that it should be or could be that zone in the future, it's not ready for that. And you can make that recommendation and you can make those findings, and then that goes to council and they can decide to look at the same record you did, or they can just adopt your recommendation. But yeah, it's,
So that's a legitimate finding. At this date in time,
Mhm.
those roads are not adequate to handle increased, I don't know, 50, 100 cars a day.
well, the roads, here's how I would distinguish it. And George, you tell me if you agree with this. I think how you would distinguish that, the roads that are not specific to what would be required for a particular project.
And I'm talking existing roads. When I
Yeah.
say roads, I'm talking existing Benton City DOT roads, not ones that are gonna put on site, but what those are gonna feed into and increase the traffic on existing roads, because that's the type of pushback we're getting from citizens. It's a big deal in this town. People
Mhm.
aren't happy about that.
Yes.
So that's what I'm speaking to, is not.
So if they met all the other criteria of that one, we could send it through for approval with our finding based on that one criteria, and then city.
Well, it's funny.
Council would.
It is a little,
evaluate that.
it is a little weird because it doesn't say thou shalt meet all of these. It doesn't say, only needs to meet any, right? So you'll either say, it'll say shall comply with all, or it will say any of the following. And it doesn't really say either. It says the decision. So the review criteria map amendment is the decision on a proposed map amendment shall be based on findings and conclusions thereof as they relate to the following. And then it just names those 5 different things. So it's in compliance with the comp plan. It's the properties in question. It's suitable for permitted uses under the zoning district. And now, and I don't, maybe I need to do a little more research about understanding what that means. Number 2, the properties in question is suitable for uses permitted under the requesting zoning district. So I don't know if that means like physical, like geography uses, like elevation. I mean, is that what we're talking about there? Or vegetation? I don't know, but we can do some more research and help you with that. But no, essentially what you're needing to do is if you're entitled to your opinion on these issues. Now, whether it's in the comp plan or not, I don't think that's really up for debate. It's either it is or it isn't. So you're kind of stuck with that one, but all the other ones really are up to you to decide based on what you're getting on the record. And as long as you're basing your opinion of these, whether these are met or not, based on what you're getting in the record, and then basing your recommendation on those findings, you're doing your job to go to council, and council can decide if they want to adopt it or not. And councils oftentimes do what they want.
Yeah, that'll work out. No, yeah. Anybody else?
Well, I know it's just difficult to make a decision with all the differences in the comp plan.
Hmm.
And having changed staff so many times, I've been re-watching the meetings. I know you read that. I've been re-watching
that's
all
right.
the council meetings
Right.
and all of our meetings. I've already watched our last meeting here. Because we've lost something in the mix. And so I'm still looking for other meetings. I think it'd do everyone a good deal of good to do the same, because there'd be less confusion if they knew what had transpired before they came. because a lot of this stuff was supposed to be set in stone, which is not.
Well, and we're about to go through a comp plan amendment process.
Yeah.
So that, and so a lot of what you're seeing too is, you know, and it is difficult because the City of Benton City plans Undergrowth Management Act, which is great for a lot of things. But what it also means is, and I've said this for years, is that it's also, the downside is that the same laws that apply to cities 15 times your size end up applying to you, which is really tough sometimes to fit at this level. That being said, you know, it is very helpful because it forces people to engage in that process. It truly is a planning process, and those meetings are coming, and that will be the time for to take in that data. And what's great about in those settings with when the comp plan comes up for review and you know the what we call the 8-year amendment is it's not heated in the sense that nobody's, you know, necessarily got a project writing on it, right? Because those are comp plan, those are big discussions, those are big overarching. Where do we want our city to go, and where do we want to be with it? Now, I will say that while that's true, the other half of this is that the legislature has some pretty clear ideas about where they want you to take your city. And we get reminded of that every time they meet in January. And then we get a whole bunch of laws that kick in around June or July. And we have to scramble to try to get those implemented to make sure we're in good shape. And we've just dealt with some of those today, as a matter of fact. So long and short of it is, it's one of those things where it's an important process, but it also it's more of a, sometimes it's more of an art than a science. So it can be a little nuanced.
I remember what I was gonna ask.
Oh, good.
Because it was about our last meeting.
Mhm.
We had a fact-finding hearing, or that's the first time I'd ever partaken in one of those, and I wasn't sure what we were supposed to do in such instances.
You're talking about that situation in particular?
Our last
Our
meeting.
Yeah.
last meeting,
Yeah.
we had, and I wasn't sure, it was under the hearing section, but I think it was that told it wasn't in hearing and.
Yeah, and I think there was some,
Of us, because.
Right.
I was clueless.
and I apologize for not being able to be here for that meeting. I thought I was going to be able to, and something came up at the last moment that I couldn't get out of, but yeah, what needs to happen is the recommendation, and I don't want to talk out of school here, and we should probably talk in executive session just to make sure that we're okay. But essentially what needs to happen is findings need to be drafted that the commission is basing their, I think it's clear that they made those findings at that hearing, but those haven't been drafted and accepted as part of the recommendation. And that's what I think council is looking for on their end, is they need some written findings to base the decision that was made that can be based on. So that's what's being requested. That I'm
very
assuming.
confused because we pretty much presented the exact same findings that we did in the hearing. And then we have this fact finding here, and please, anybody.
I
Because it was the same
Yeah.
information presented the second time.
I based my findings on what I heard from the associate of the developer. There, we never heard directly from the developer. I think he was here for the last meeting, but we never heard directly from him. So my findings was from the meeting that we all attended, where we listened to him, and there's 22 families that live down there. And we listened to them as well. And the farmland and how it doesn't match the apartment home site for the area. And so my findings are based solely on those two meetings. And so I
So
don't
is
know
it-
where you want us to dig from.
No. So maybe this is the best way to go, is maybe it sounds like I can work with George and the staff to hear those or look at I guess the transcripts of those meetings. And then we can base the findings. I mean, because it sounds like the decision's been made, the findings, you felt like you had the findings at that time. And now we just need to get those in.
Each of us did, and in talking to the associate of the developer,
Mhm. Representative, sure.
yes, and talking to the people that came that lived there. We came to a understanding that they didn't want apartments, even though that the developer did, but that they were more okay with the 21. Some of it says 21, some of it says 22 houses that they could develop without us rezoning them. That was said in the meeting before last. So that's how we came to the realization of the fact that the developer was gonna get to develop anyway, and the people that live there that didn't want apartments next to their cows, chickens, and goats were okay with houses, and there were houses in the surrounding area. So even though 21 houses is a lot of houses compared to houses on farmland on large lots.
Sure.
Mhm.
So we thought that was a fair compromise for both parties, where the farmers could feel like an egg that they stopped huge apartment buildings and the developer could still develop.
Well, why don't we do this? Why don't we, it sounds like you all feel like you've made it clear what your findings were for your decision.
Mhm.
So, well, why don't I'll work with staff and see if we can do that. And then if we don't feel like we have what we need legally to make the recommendation, if we feel like that it's still not clear, then we can come back to you and we can redo that. So that,
And we never
Thanks.
heard from the public that was here, whether it was the developer or people from the public, because they weren't allowed to speak. We were just speaking with each other. And that's why I think we could have benefited by a closed session so that we could hash out and try to figure out where we wanted to go with this and what was expected of us. That's where we're at. We're not sure
okay,
at this
Mhm.
point what was expected.
okay. Well, no, I don't want you to feel like that. And I know the mayor and George don't want you to feel like that either. So,
Right.
and Carla, I didn't mean to leave her out.
Right.
She'll get me in the parking lot afterwards if I don't. Anyway, so yeah, we'll work on it. We'll do what we can. And then if we don't have, after looking at that, if we don't feel like we can clearly identify what those findings were that can be supported by the record, right? I mean, I think that's the key, is that because somebody would, that's where they would be able to try to make some hay if it's not clear in the record that that's what it was based on. We'll go from there and we'll come back and we'll get it until we get it right.
Yeah, we want to do the right thing.
Mm.
We just want to know what the city thinks that is.
Yeah, and
Hmm.
we're happy to assist. I mean, if the mayor and the council wants us to come to more of these meetings, we're happy to if we think that's helpful. I mean, it may not be, right? I mean, sometimes you get lawyers involved and makes everything, slows everything down, So, yeah, so we'll do that and then we'll let you know. We'll let you know. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have specific regulatory questions of you specifically? How can the commissioner communicate with you?
Well, the best way,
Or-
yeah, if you go through George, that's probably the best, because then a lot of those questions are going to be able to be answered. And since they're the ones who are going to be ultimately responsible
Right.
for the bill showing how many times they called us, so it's best to run those through them. But we're certainly happy to be part of that so that you can do your job. I mean, that's why we're here.
Hmm.
But we're gonna get specific here, so we can't call you.
I would not do that.
I was gonna say that. And-
Yeah.
It wouldn't be, I'll put it this way, let me be clear, if you, I would need, and it's because we are both the administrative and the executive, or the executive branch and the legislative branch attorney, right, as the city attorney. You are a subcommittee of the legislative branch. So any conversations that you have with us are clearly privileged, but typically it is kind of a weird deal because we are contracted. The mayor is the one who has to be the one who regulates that, because that's where that can get kind of out of control, because
Right.
Not
I'm just-
present company excluded, but some people get a little happy with the phone, if you know what I'm saying,
Yes, and I totally appreciate that, but that was for everybody to
Right.
understand, and also if we do have specific questions. I used to work in the regulatory field.
Mm.
I
know.
suspect you wanna to write them down in detail so that you and they can.
It's a lot-
share it amongst
It's a
us.
lot easier to do before we act, so yes.
So that's what I want, so we take expectations, if we have a question of you, we will
Yeah.
draft an email and give it to George.
Yeah.
And we'll work through that.
Yeah.
So Thank you,
Absolutely.
thank you so much.
All right.
Okay.
All right, I'm gonna
That
go
was
get yelled at
helpful.
at another meeting if you don't mind, so. Not that you guys did.
Thank you for coming.
That's okay. They'll, I'm not sad about missing that one.
Ah,
Thank
All
you
right, thank you.
so.
yeah,
Okay.
that was a big help. Thank you.
Sorry to say, we'll be talking again.
Look forward to it. Thank you.
Sounds like a plan to me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna take 2 minute break, please. Sorry, folks, that was not on the schedule.
I just have a comment from the people. You just have
Zoom as an option that'll actually do transcription for you. I was trying to look into that for you.
No, they probably.
Okay, Dealer, here's nice. You have a public hearing for, the conditional use application, CUP. Sorry, 2408. Curacao Daycare Center to construct a new 4,800 square foot. And, that. Sorry, folks, this is a new sequence for our public hearing, so bear with me if I read this. Okay, we have a sign-in sheet, sit at the table up there. Anyone wishing to speak for or against the proposal will have to sign in. Please limit your comments to 3 minutes. And what we'll do is we'll allow George to, the planner who's pointing at the piece of paper, to give us a summary of the project. That is the subject of this hearing before we proceed. And then we'll take public comments, and then the commission will chat, and then we will make a recommendation. And with that, okay, George, I'll be ready.
I can do my own.
Yeah.
Okay, at the direction of the planning commission, the secretary shall announce the ground time. Is there anything? Okay, let's see. Victor, did you plan on commenting? I just.
Only if I need to. I put my name out.
Oh, you did, okay, I didn't see it.
You bet.
George, you can proceed, I'm sorry.
Okay, thank you.
I just- Not used to people.
Thank you, Chairman Wallace, members of the Planning Commission. This is conditional use 24-08. The applicant is Rafael and Arcelia Cepeda. They are also the owners of the property. The site location is 1108 Grace Avenue. The parcel number is 11897-203-0004010, and that's the county assessor number. The zoning of the property is R2 medium density residential. And again, this is a conditional use request to construct a 4,800 square foot children's preschool facility. The subject property is 1.1 acres in size. The total number of children attending the classrooms will be determined by the Washington State Department of Child, Youth, and Family, which is a Washington State agency. Would we review these applications by is out through our municipal code and comprehensive plan. Benton City Municipal Code applicable criteria is the Title II, Division 5, Administrative Procedures, which is chapter 2.70 Land Use Administration. Title 20 is the zoning. Also under chapter 20.21 is residential medium density district regulations. And the reason why we're here tonight, listed in the R2 medium density district, is allows for conditional uses, and children and preschool facilities are a conditional use listed in the R2. Other findings tonight, again, the project site is 1.1 acres in size, which is large enough to accommodate the proposed 4,800 square foot facility. The existing 5,500 square foot carousel daycare center and associated paved parking lot is located to the east half of the parcel and adjacent to the new proposed facility. The subject parcel is located adjacent to residential development to the east, west, and north. Across Grace Street to the south is the Benton City School District facility, and I believe there's another daycare facility there as well to the west. Thank you. The existing 5,000 square foot daycare facility and the 21 space paved parking lot are located on the site. Approximately 50% of the site will be impervious. The stormwater runoff from the parking areas will be collected by on-site catch basins. Stormwater will be infiltrate on site. Street trees and grass and shrubs will be planted to landscape the site. The site is generally flat, but lying above the adjacent street. No proposed earthwork is proposed. The site is not located in the 100-year floodplain. New building will not encroach over existing utility easements. City sewer and water will serve the site. Electrical power will be provided by Benton PUD. Again, churches, schools, nursery schools, and daycare centers are allowed as a conditional use per chapter 20.21.030 of the municipal code. A SEPA checklist was prepared by the applicant and submitted for review by the State Department of Ecology. We've only got one comment back, and I will get that to you. That's from Department of Ecology about runoff. They always give those out, but you'll get a copy of that. The subject property is located in and served by the Benton Irrigation District. I think I've covered pretty much or summarized everything. So we do have the applicant or the representative of the applicant is here. You want to come forward and just introduce yourself, and if they've got questions of you or whatever, just.
I'm Chris Baugh. I'm an architect out of the city of Kennewick. I've been working with the Zepedas on this facility for since probably about March or April of this year. And happy to answer any questions that you have regarding the facility. I know originally the plan was to use existing, just as an FYI, they had some cubicles, or not cubicles, but modular buildings that were donated to them. We assessed those and basically told them they were insufficient and would be very difficult to get approved, and also meet any energy code requirements based on what we've dealt with in the past and don't want to deal with those buildings. So we encourage them to go a different route, and this is the choice that they've made, is to put a whole new building on that site. And so we worked with them to develop a building that meets their requirements, but also didn't have to impact the parking lot, which was very nice. We didn't have to improve any more parking for that space. So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
I wondered, I wasn't able to get up there before the meeting because I usually drive by and look, but I know that there was that early learning center up there, and that's separate from the daycare. Will this be a fenced facility?
the space around the building itself will be fenced off because it's partial playground area. And so the building There is a plan on our site to fence off along the south end of that building, about along the property line. And I think they started doing some, but it wasn't in the right spot, so we're gonna have to modify some things. But yes, the plan is to fence off that area
And they do have
will there,
a fence around, excuse me.
around the other side.
That's a
Will there-
retaining wall, I'm sorry.
it's
Is
okay.
that
I'm sorry,
something that
trying to-
I see a retaining wall on the plan?
Yeah, retaining wall, the site is rather high compared to where their existing building is. The intent is that they will be cooking in the existing facility and then taking food up to that facility when weather permits. And we've extended a ramp that will go from that space up to the other spot.
Mhm.
In order to get the ramp to be fit the accessibility requirements and the slope not to be too high, we will be moving some of the dirt out there and lowering that site approximately 5 feet. And that will require a retaining wall as well. But the way that we've oriented the building, we won't be too close to the site that we would have to provide any fire separation walls around that side. That's good point. the retaining
Question
wall.
on the landscaping.
Yep.
You're gonna plant trees, be my recommendation that no trees ought to be planted over the sewer lines, or depending on how the power is brought in, none underneath power lines.
Right.
That's a good recommendation.
Our hope is that we'll be able to maintain some of the existing, in fact, that was the client's request. And in fact, that's why the building ended up oriented the way it was, so that we could use some of the existing sycamores that are out there. We didn't want to get rid of them. So I think some of them are getting, are gonna be felled because of playground has to be removed, but we're trying to maintain the existing, and we'll take into note the locations of power and sewer lines as well.
Because of the increase of children, when they are released, is there gonna be an adequate lane for the parents to drive in and stop to pick up the kids?
Yeah, there is actually a kind of a U shape in the
Yeah, I
parking
saw
lot
there
that's
is now.
existing there.
Mhm.
And then the plan is that they will maintain that. And because of the age groups that are being serviced there, there will be some that are toddler age, a year and a half to 3 years old. And then others that are, or actually, I think it's closer to from 3 to 5 that are gonna be in that space. And then from 5 to 12 in another area. A lot of those children aren't going to be there until after school. So some of them will be during the day,
Mhm.
others will be sort of after school hours. So I don't think we'll see a traffic impact where you'll have the same people vying for the same spot to drop off kids.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you.
no, that's a good question.
I saw that it said, I think, stormwater is gonna go to catch basins, if I recall, or is there just one? I think I see one on here, but I wasn't sure if there more than one catch basin.
Well, they have
Hmm.
existing for the cave parking lot,
Okay.
and then they will have to retain water, from the roof and whatnot on the site.
Yeah, any storm drain will maintain onto the site. Yeah,
Thank you.
sure.
Thank you,
Thanks.
thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you for saving the trees.
Hmm.
Yeah. Those. Need to get rid of all of them.
Hmm.
They provide a lot of good shade in that area too, for the playground.
Hmm.
Um,
Was there someone before? I thought there was two people before us.
Christy was a
Okay.
civil engineer and she's not able to, she had to go to another meeting in Rossville.
okay.
I'm good.
Go up to the church. Yeah.
So, thank you for allowing me to post my views.
Name, date.
My name is Mike Gorman. I live at 1105 Hazel Avenue, or better known as Hawaii. We live on the same block as the daycare and expected building site, new building site. We've been involved with that daycare for many years. We were instrumental in the beginning, previous to their building. Uh, So we have somewhat of a history. We also have had foster kids that we have used the facility. Never have had a problem, especially there was originally a fear that it was going to be extremely noisy. That's never impacted any of us that live on the block. And in terms of parking, there's always been available parking. The daycare also has had I can't think of the name now, but parents cannot just drive in and drop off their kids. Each parent, pardon?
Security check-in.
Yeah. So each parent has to bring in their child, sign them in. Same thing for drop off and pickup. There has never, I've been up there many a time. With the fact that the parents have to come in and sign in or sign them out. The parking area has never been a problem situation with all these cars coming and going. So I don't foresee any predicted parking situation. And because it's not on the main street, it's on a side street, traffic moves slowly entering and exiting. Yeah, I'm all for it. I see that with this coming school situation, the daycare extending itself into a school situation. I think this is advantageous for all the parents who have children coming to that spot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Same family, Marilyn Gorman. So again, we butt up behind them. And our biggest thing is not knowing how other people felt about it, and with the expansion, with the growth in the city. Both of us are retired teachers. So the growth in the city, the support of the parents, and having the facility in place before the homes are built or in the same process, rather than building homes, not having a place for kids. I think it's beneficial to Benton City, because if those homes were built and the parents put their kids into daycares in West Richland or near their places of employment, you wouldn't be bringing I think this is supporting Benton City, supporting the parents of Benton City. And so, again, not knowing if somebody was not supporting them, we wanted to absolutely support them because we respect their program. We respect their security of kids, respect the traffic flow, again, because it's not like everybody picking their kid up at 3 o'clock. They're open early. People drop them off at 6, they drop them off at 7, they drop them off at 8, and they pick them up at varied times. So our biggest thing is supporting it and realizing that taking care of our kids before we have a house, and we all see the impact of the damage to the church right now. That's impacting, some families right now. And the other thing I had said previously, not regarding this, was making sure that the citizens of Benton City know who to concern, when we have concerns, who to let know. So that's why we were talking over here. So I didn't know if you had we're 100% in favor of them expanding, just because of the respect we have for their program, the respect we have for they're involved in things within the community, other activities. And I feel that
it's not gonna impact anything negatively. It's not like it's in the middle, like you say, a bunch of houses or anything. We have business, we have that, we've got the school across the street. So I think we want to support it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
No one in opposition. Pardon me?
There were no letters
No,
sent in,
that I
were
could
there,
pick.
George?
We didn't get any.
We
No,
didn't get any
no,
letters.
we just got one in the SEPA process, but that was about stormwater and stuff.
Oh,
We discuss the proposal. If you like those more. We can tell we're the applicant before we close that, the hearing.
I read all of this and
Mm.
I remember picking up one of my grandkids there before years ago, and I feel like they were safe there, and this is a good idea. Because of all the families coming in and all the need.
Mhm.
I'm in favor of this,
100%.
Mm.
yeah.
Well, we cannot, why don't you make them, did you have a?
No, I was just gonna make the motion, so makes no difference, she can go ahead.
I move that the commission adopt the findings and conclusions prepared by staff and as amended by the commission as set forth in action of CUP 24-08 above.
Second.
Vote all those in favor?
Hey, Commissioner
Aye.
McLeod, Commissioner Thompson,
Aye.
Commissioner Wallace,
Aye.
Commissioner Lynn,
Aye.
Commissioner Hamilton.
Aye.
Carries. We're gonna have been. It's been proving. Oh. Okay,
We need to close the hearing.
yeah, planners report.
No,
right?
close the hearing.
So
Close this
the
part.
hearing, close the public hearing at 7:26 and. The planners report.
Thank you.
Sorry, did I lose my place? I can't find.
No,
it.
you're okay. You're okay. Thank you, Chairman Wallace. I dropped on everybody's place there, the planners report.
I found that.
For your information of what the planning department's, some of the bigger projects we're working on, and I'll just go over it real briefly. We do have, another plat that's been submitted for 13 lot preliminary plat subdivision. And this was, actually a resubmittal for Cameo Vista subdivision that, was approved back in 2018. And by our code, they have 5 years to come in to get their final, and start working on it, and they let that run out.
Okay, so let me catch up. If we had 5 years for that.
That expired,
So they have to go through.
right, and there was issues with COVID and health issues and stuff like that.
Right.
So they wanted to come back and resubmit, and that's what they have, and it's under review now. And we submitted a SEPA, and that is for a 13 lot subdivision in the R2 zone. And it is located at the southeast corner of Chris Avenue and 14th Street. There is no address because it's vacant property.
Is that where they haven't mowed the lawn?
I'm not sure.
Excuse me.
It's right here on 13th.
It's right over here.
House, and that's surrounded by, right up to Chris, it's like 13th and Chris.
Cause it says 14th, and that's what I'm trying to figure out what,
Actually, it's 14th and Chris.
Sorry.
14th
that's
runs down.
Just turned 14th, yeah.
yeah, cause it's like those mobile homes are parked here. And then there's that one home on the side that now has chickens.
It's north. So right there on Chris and 14th, it's that like, there's a house there and then there's a bunch of property that gains access. Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I'm saying, so it's kind of that unmowed area.
it is definitely an unmowed area.
Yes.
You are correct.
So they will be mowing. More to come on that, because that once we hear all the comments and stuff, there will be there will be a public hearing for that, and so you'll be able to get a chance to talk with those folks, but that is a resident,
We actually worked on
Housing.
this before.
right, and it was approved, but they ran out of time.
Yeah.
The next one is west of SR 225 and north of Babs Avenue. And this is a submittal for a 46 lot preliminary plat subdivision on 13.27 acres. And this is also R2 medium density residential. And that just came in recently. There is some long-term issues with some of the property because it's in the floodplain. But we'll be reviewing that, and that's what will also come, that's on the north side of Babs Avenue.
I'm trying to think of a parcel that's looked at large there.
Hmm. Is that where all the cows and everything are?
Probably. It is a pasture.
Okay, it would be.
So there's houses and cows.
There's a
and-
couple of houses there,
Hmm.
and vacant property, and this will intake, composed of, I think there's 3 different parcels there.
Is it off the Carroll? Is it Market Carroll Village? Right there?
Mm-mm. No,
So we don't have an
Western,
address?
Western Ninth.
this is vacant property. There is no address as of yet. It's just, you know, where the road, Bab, and the road splits.
Yes.
It's
yes.
just to the right.
Oh, that one.
Yeah.
Okay, I know where you're talking. Yes, okay, I was thinking of a different. Oh, no,
Yeah.
Across from the flagpole.
You're right. I.
Yeah. Are those nice cows with the long horns on? Yeah.
The Cherry Grove Lane, as it's now called, it was Olson Brothers subdivision. They've been moving along at a very fast pace. They're going to do the submittal of a final plat. And this will be for the final approval for a 210 lot subdivision on 40.92 acres. And which is adjacent to the market there and the school. And they have been working diligently in getting their water, sewer, and roads for their phase 1 of 5 phases. Another item I've been working on is review of the Benton County, what they call it, the countywide planning policies. And this goes with the Growth Management Act requirement that the county draft up policies in regards to urban growth areas, rural lands, open space, public facilities and lands. They also work on a population densities and population projections. I've met one time with the county on that, and also the city of Prosser, Kennewick, and the Tri-Cities are all part of this. And we take a look at, because every 7 years, 8 years, the comp plans have to be updated. But this deals with the urban lands out around and some of the bigger issues. And so we're taking a look at that, and I'll be discussing more on that once we get moving on that a little bit. We've been going over the code on residential manufactured home park district and RV park district standards. Draft up some proposals. The attorney is looking at that now. And again, we are still working on the I-82 sub-area plan. There's 2 items that have to be done to meet Department of Ecology SEPA process that wasn't done previously. Okay, that would mean there was the cultural survey up there. The other issue is the step habitat assessment for critters and that sort of thing up there. And so those 2 things need to be done. We do have, we went out, and there is a consulting firm that has submitted a good project that comes within our schedule and meets the standards that we need to do that assessment up there. And the mayor is working on the cultural survey part, I believe, with the Indian.
The tribes are still involved.
Oh,
with
yeah.
that. Yeah, and there's the driver
Mhm.
with that, so.
We've had, well, at least 3 developer companies that are looking to be participants. You know, that property is owned by DNR.
Hmm.
It's approximately 223 acres. It's mixed uses, so there is housing, commercial and light industrial, plus possible for public lands, which would include a school, that sort of thing. The Department of Natural Resources owns it. They have the right through state law and to sell a portion of that land for housing. And that's what the private developers will bid on. They do not sell the lands that will be for commercial or industrial. The majority of it will be mixed type housing. It will go through a bid process to the highest bidder. Once the cultural survey is done and the natural resources assessment, the land assessment, and we're going to go on from there, but the developer will be developing the public infrastructure, the roads, the water systems, all that up there.
So all those meetings we had in the past are null and void?
No, that came up with your plan.
Okay.
I'm still looking for
Okay.
the work shops that we did.
That's what
on
I'm
that
saying.
Property, and I thought that DNR took the schools off of the table for that land. Has that been changed?
Let me clarify. The developers looking at it to work with the city have agreed to provide land there for a school and a park. In other words, they'll buy the land, they'll donate the land.
Was that the developers that are gonna be north of the school, that north of the store that are buying and donating the land? Or are you talking about the south corridor with DNR land?
The land that's south of 82, the south. corridor.
Sub area plan,
Right.
south of
They-
82.
One of the developers in the design had 5.9 acres that they were going to leave out for a school and about 6 acres for a park, and so we're working on that.
Thank you for clarifying that.
Right.
Now it's
The
more
DNR
deliver.
DNR's position is somewhat different.
Yeah, I know.
They require the school district to buy that property.
Oh,
Yes, and
Mm.
I
The
heard that it
developers
was gonna
are,
be donated.
hopefully will be donating the land.
Yeah, they're willing.
That will help.
Right.
The
That will
money
help a
that
lot.
comes from the sale of property from DNR for housing goes back into the school districts for building schools.
I did not know that. Thank you, George, for sharing that. That is fascinating. I would have never guessed that.
How many acres are involved in that?
Total of about 223 acres,
200,
roughly.
depends on what they do with the,
But the school property size will be 9
they
acres. you
said 5.9 acres. was what they
5.9.
proposed, which is sufficient.
Now, there is some property up there around 5 acres too, that's owned by the irrigation district.
There'll be,
Which district? We have many.
Kennewick Irrigation
Oh,
District,
it's
Okay.
okay.
and that is be next to DNR's commercial land.
So the sub area properties run parallel with I-82
Yeah.
up Jacobs
Mhm.
and is bordered on the west side by Fields. It's the road that goes into the gravel pit
Mhm.
and the Shell station sits there. The Shell station really isn't in the sub area plan.
Mm.
It's just the
Really?
property
Yeah. it is.
going east of Fields.
Never was.
So we can't take credit for developing.
Well, we actually could.
Yeah, you can
They
because
came here and we discussed every detail of it.
Yeah.
DNR sold that property to the city.
Yeah,
Mm.
here we thought we got off to game busters.
We never got the sandwich shop and the car
Restaurant.
wash.
Yeah.
and Stuff
I
that
tell you,
we
Rick.
talked about.
You
but-
got Dutch Brothers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
where are
Dutch
they?
Brothers.
It's been a long time.
They were in a big hurry, up and wait. But I
Yeah.
think they've come in and got their building permit.
Oh, okay.
Yay.
I was wondering.
And
'cause I-
they will be
That's
going
wonderful.
west of
Hmm.
the Shell station.
What DNR will do is, they'll be the same as the Costco in Richland. They will retain ownership of the dirt, lease the land fully to a single commercial developer
Mhm.
to develop the commercial portion. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's what they did up in Pasco,
yeah.
because Lowe's
exactly.
was the one that, the initial.
Okay, anything
Business.
other, any questions for George or future agenda items, action items, anybody have information, full commissioner?
Oh, the next meeting date is December 10th. I think
Yes.
that's what you decided on at 6.
Yes,
Yes,
make sure confirm that for the next meeting.
Mhm.
yeah.
That's Tuesday.
Yes,
Mhm.
thank you.
And everybody have a nice Thanksgiving.
Mhm.
holiday.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you, everybody, I guess we got adjourned.
Mm.
Okay,
Thank
one
you.
thing I'm certain